in 2019, the first time capsule buried by Stumpy Sanderson and his gang of mischievous working-class boys, and which was actually an old Watney's Party 7 can, was unearthed. Then in 2023, the second time capsule, which was an old Courage Jackpot Bitter Party can, was discovered. And now, Whistling 5 Anarchic Productions, in conjunction with the 1970s Cigarette Appreciation Club and Puffer Patterson's Benevolent Fund for Aging Thespians, proudly presents Series 2 of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s stories, and the 22 stories found in that second time capsule. As narrated by Andrew Brammer. Bonjour, bon après-midi, et bonsoir. The story you are about to hear is narrated in the first person, because I, just like Stumpy, witnessed firsthand the momentous events which it describes. So, let's park up the rally chopper, dim the lava lamp, switch off that episode of Catweasel, finish up the plate of Vesta beef curry, crack open a can of Double Diamond, light up a mannequin cigar, and kick back, sit back, and listen in to the anarchic and outrageous japes, scrapes and capers of Stumpy Sanderson and his gang. For this story, we head back to 1979 for 2 merry monks and 2 pairs of clackers. Even Stumpy and I could not have foreseen the shocking and grotesque outcome of the last Thursday of school in the summer of 1979, the events of which I will now recall. The occasion was the 5th Form Revue, an end-of-school tradition in which members of the 5th Form, some of whom were in their last year of school, some of whom would be staying on for 6th Form, would get the chance to perform a variety show in front of the rest of the year below, and a fairly large assortment of teachers. And the massive significance of this occasion was that the performers were given free rein to perform whatever they wanted. There was no censorship or prior vetting of content. So for our year, teeming with anarchists and subversives, this presented a golden opportunity, made even sweeter by the event having the long-standing seal of approval of the mild-mannered headmaster and the school traditionalists, meaning there was nothing that Mr. Butler, our despotic head of year, and his cohort of enforcers could do about it. As for Stumpy and I, we would be taking key roles in the revue's closing pièce de résistance, a one-act play specially written by Puffer Patterson, that portly member of our gang and the greatest thespian of his generation. A play that was a bizarre cross between Tennessee Williams's Sweet Bird of Youth, the Dick Emery Show, and an episode of Bless This House. Stumpy and I had been scripted as a couple of American drifters. Puffer would be playing a Deep South gentleman called Sidney Jamestown, and Bendy Henderson had agreed to take the role of a Southern belle called Ethel Bainbridge, for which his costume was going to be one of his mum's pinafore slips, one of his aunt's blonde wigs, and a pair of another aunt's Dr. Scholl orthopaedic sandals. But undoubtedly the highlight of the whole review was going to be our play's finale, in which our school's greatest clowns, jesters and grinning idiots, Smiler Morton and Gorpa Alsop, would enter from stage left to both bring to life the infamous character of the Merry Monk. The Merry Monk, that crude and vulgar toy, whose notoriety many of us boys had first discovered during middle school, and whose tradition had been carried on by some devoted keepers of the flame throughout their school days right up to this very day. A smiling and innocent-looking plastic doll of a monk, very different in concept though to an action man, and which, when one pressed down on its abbatial head, would pop something foul and unspeakable out from beneath its brown habit. Now, our play script read that just after Bendy had delivered his emotional closing lines as Ethel Bainbridge, Smiler and Gawper would walk on, wearing brown felt habits that had been meticulously handcrafted in needlework by gentle Gerald and delicate Desmond. Both Smiler and Gawper's hair would be shockingly cut in the tonsure hairstyle of a monk, for which they would be shooting out to a barber's at lunchtime with forged notes, pretending to be from their mums, saying, "Dear Mr. Barber, please take this letter as permission for my son to have a monk's tonsure hairstyle, as upon his leaving school he will be taking up monastic orders and entering into religious life." After Smiler and Gawper had then walked on stage, Stumpy and I would both exclaim, "Oh look, it's Friar Allsop and Friar Morton. We wonder if we press down on their heads, what will happen?" Then, as many of the boys in the audience would knowingly roar with laughter, Smiler and Gawper would stand side on to the audience. We would press down on their heads, and with Smiler's right hand and Gawper's left hand concealed inside hidden pockets within their habits, they would simultaneously both press down on a button within these pockets, buttons that were part of special spring-loaded contraptions which had been ingeniously designed and manufactured by Lanky Shinton and Chipolata Mick in woodwork and metalwork lessons. Devices which, when these buttons were pressed down on, would trigger unholy movements, resulting in a 10-inch cut of broom handle emerging from each brown habit. On the end of each cut of broom handle would be a maroon flag, which on Gawper's would say "The" in bright yellow lettering, and on Smiler's would say "End." This was sure to not only bring the house down in roaring mirth, but would also leave Butler and his cronies seething in fury. But the only downside to all this, the only sword of Damocles hanging above our heads, was the other tradition of the last week of every year of school: the publication of the Milton Sisters' Top 10 Most Wanted list. The Milton Sisters, those razor-haired, razor-lipped twins of terror, Mandy and Melanie Milton, our gang's most long-standing and most fearsome and recurring foes. Stumpy and I had crossed swords with them on so many occasions that it was absolutely no surprise at all to find ourselves yet again on this list. And this year, we had achieved ultimate pride of place in being number one. Now, there are far too many heinous punishments the Milton sisters had subjected Stumpy and me to over the years to mention here, but some of the worst included the time they had buried us up to our necks in the school sandpit, the occasion when they had lined us up for execution in front of a spud-gun-wielding firing squad, and of course, the most searing memory of all, the time when they had crushed mine and Stumpy's clackers in the school woodwork bench vice, the painful memory of which experience we had never forgotten. Luckily, though, we had so far all week managed to dodge and evade these witches and their gang, a week in which they had swiped, hooded, and carried off to the school field other unfortunate wanted list names, subjecting them to various atrocities. However, Stumpy and I both realised we still had a real dilemma to overcome with the Fifth Form Revue, for the Milton sisters had been allowed onto the bill with their band Ingrid and the Severed Hydra. This meant they would be hanging around backstage and therefore be in potential and frequent close proximity to us. Stumpy and I would thus have to be on constant alert and employ our best dodge and evade tactics. So, now it is 2 o'clock. The school hall is full, the crowd vibrant and expectant, the performers backstage and ready to go, ready to unleash our Darwinian lunatic asylum of a stage show. Many of our allies and accomplices are sitting in the front row, all buzzing with excitement, particularly at the prospect of Smiler and Gawper's planned finale, word of which has gone round like wildfire, to the great mirth and amusement of many of the boys, and to the tut-tut-tutting and sighs of disapproval from others. But where the heck are Smiler and Gawper? They still haven't got back from the barbers. No panic yet, though. There's still plenty of time before we are due on. And then the show begins. Stumpy and I peering out at the opening acts from the side curtain at one end of the stage, the opposite end to where we now have spotted the Milton sisters, who have also spotted us. As the acts roll on, the raucous mirth and cheers from the crowd is astonishing. This is pure theatre, a bacchanalian cross between Tiswas and Wagner's Gotterdammerung. How all the pupils and some of the good egg teachers are laughing, emitting great roars, shouts, and guffaws of enjoyment. How they are relishing the unrestrained anarchy of the spectacle. How Butler and his henchmen, sitting there with their gritted teeth, are fuming. But where are Smiler and Gawper? The clock is ticking fast, though there are still 40 minutes to our stage time. Stumpy and I are also keeping a wary eye on the Milton sisters, who are now pointing in our direction as Gordon Sputnik Mahoney, that spiky-haired daredevil, takes to the stage, leaving the audience astonished and some visibly upset with the battering he takes with his hardest head in school routine, an act for which he has come on stage in a metal helmet, a la the man in the Iron Mask, and then has a couple of boys bash him repeatedly about the head for long minutes with rounders bats. The theory being that after this good hiding, a grinning Sputnik will remove the helmet and prove to the world that, indeed, his head can withstand the most intense and severe punishment. After he finishes, he comes backstage, grinning and seemingly unscathed from the battering he has just endured, although later in the day he is taken to the sick room with suspected concussion. But where are Smiler and Gawper? Stumpy and I again look across to the other side of the stage and see the Milton sisters now making throat-cutting gestures at us, as the next act up is Puffer Patterson, who, as well as performing in our play, is also reprising one of his greatest ever performances, reciting Ozymandias by Shelley in the style and spirit of Blakey from On the Buses, in which Puffer changes the line, "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair," to, "My name is Butler, head of year. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." This brings the biggest tidal wave of laughter and cheers so far, with many of our allies shouting out in unison the line about Butler, whose face now looks like it is going to explode. But where are Smiler and Gawper? As Puffer wheezes off stage after having taken his bows to tumultuous applause, Stumpy and I now see the Milton sisters across the other side of the stage, mimicking throttling actions in our direction. With Puffer, Stumpy and I dart to the changing room to get into costume. Bendy Henderson is already in there, looking astonishing as Ethel Bainbridge. After changing, we peer out again from the side curtains, where Bats Malone is now on stage, dressed in his dad's oversized suit and kipper tie, smoking a cigarette with a whiskey in the other hand, and who is causing shock and outrage with his working man's club comedian turn, full of bawdy and raucous material, ripe with inappropriate and offensive material, but who eventually wins the crowd over with some mother-in-law jokes. It is now less than 10 minutes to stage time as the Milton sisters hit the stage with their band, performing their song, "Let's Take a Flamethrower to B Block." And this is getting desperate. Where the heck are Smiler and Gawper? But to our huge relief, they at last appear, sweating, red-faced and out of breath. And even though we only have a few minutes now for them to get ready, we all double over with laughter at the bald patches of their tonsure haircuts. "Sorry, lads," said Gawper, "the barber took ages and a lot of persuading to accept our letters were genuine. Then we had to leg it back," quickly and frantically changing into their brown felt habits, strapping the belted spring-loaded contraptions round to their waists, putting the wires and the control buttons in their hidden habit pockets, tying up the habits with rope, a small stagehand appearing with a clipboard and piping up, "2 minutes and you're on." We hit the stage, the applause deafening, and we begin our tour de force. The genius of Puffer's script, Bendy bringing the house down as Ethel Bainbridge, flapping around in Dr. Scholl sandals. Stumpy and I impressing as a couple of southern US drifters. Ethel Bainbridge delivering those tear-jerking lines. Smiler and Gorper then walking on for the finale. A guttural roar of approval rising from all our gang and many other boys, for they all know what is coming. A great chorus rising forth from boys in the crowd. Oh, merry monk, rise from your habit, reveal your glory for all to see. Stumpy and I saying our lines, then pressing down on Smiler's and Gorper's heads. Smiler and Gorper's hands moving to their concealed pockets and pressing on the buttons inside to their pockets, only for nothing to emerge from their habits, but instead the 10-inch cuts of broom handle, rising and pushing outwards on the brown felt, stretching on the material, unable to be revealed to the world, and causing instead a pair of hideous and unsightly bulges. Confusion and bewilderment on stage, as horribly and shockingly we suddenly realise that in the confusion and rush of Smiler and Gorper arriving with only minutes to spare, and with no time to check everything, that they have put their habits on the wrong way round. Back to front, with no means of open fold exit for the wooden protuberances. Roars of laughter and screams and shrieks of horror from the crowd as they all now see Smiler and Gorper with these dreadful bulges pushing outwards from beneath their habits. Smiler with that great grin across his face. Gorper gawping like a washed-up cod. Strong rugby-playing boys in the audience blanching. Girls crying and screaming. Female teachers putting hands to mouth in shock. Gentle Gerald and delicate Desmond fainting, our lot collapsing with mirth, Butler exploding, rising from his seat and roaring, "Right, I've seen enough, that's it, pull those curtains closed now!" Panic and pandemonium as we all rush off stage. Smiler and Gorper with their expanded and distended habits making people backstage recoil with horror. And amidst the bedlam, Stumpy and I now spotting the Milton sisters, who have spotted us, and with the mayhem as cover, are now giving chase. Stumpy and I dodging between curtains, props and other performers, seeing the exits blocked by Milton sisters' accomplices. Stumpy and I desperate now, but seeing a possible sanctuary diving into the prop cupboard, which is in darkness, slamming the door behind us, remaining in darkness, waiting, hardly daring to breathe, hearing voices outside the cupboard. The Milton sisters! But then the voices receding out of earshot, gradually hearing the lowering of the general hubbub outside, waiting for what seems an eternity, noises outside subsiding further, then going quiet. Switching the lights on, and to our horror, seeing a couple of guitar cases with the words Ingrid and the Severed Hydra stencilled on them. Then, suddenly, seeing the prop cupboard door open, us confronted by the feathered hair figures of Mandy and Melanie Milton, respectively wearing their 14 and 18-holed Dr. Martin boots, the pair as shocked as we are to see each other, but who then break into evil grins and utter the words, "Well, well, well, if it isn't the sweet birds of youth," closing the door behind them, and now subjecting us to having a very different form of Clackers crushed than we had experienced back in 1974. Details of which I won't go into here, but which enable us for the next 3 days to be able to deliver startlingly high-pitched renditions of Sylvester's "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real" in voices that make Staying Alive by the Bee Gees sound like it is being sung by Barry White, and which I unfortunately cannot sing or reproduce here for copyright reasons. Thank you for listening to this episode of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories. And please don't forget to check out the other stories from Series 2 and Series 1. You can also follow Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories on Facebook, where you can keep up to date with all the news about live shows and other Stumpy events. There's also the website, www.stumpysanderson.co.uk, and the Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories YouTube channel. And you can get in touch with me at andrew@stumpysanderson.co.uk. Until the next story, au revoir et bonne nuit, and keep grooving.
Yeah. This podcast has been recorded using a DIY punk rock philosophy. Yeah.